Welcome back. I'm Sean Noble.
I'm Chris Clements. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening,
good night.
wherever you are.
Wherever you are, and whenever you're listening. So
That's from the Truman Show.
Yes,
I love that movie.
it was a great movie.
That is Jim Carrey's greatest movie.
Oh, huh. No, there's a.
We can go off on another
topic.
tangent,
Wow.
but in terms of the one he probably should have won the Oscar for, I think the Truman Show was great.
Yeah, that was a phenomenal show.
He was a great Riddler too. I know some people are detractors on that, but he was.
I mean, Pet Detective, Liar,
Yeah.
Liar. I mean,
those weren't Oscar winners.
no, but they were just
Oscar nominated performances.
pretty darn
I thought
funny.
Truman Show, he showed a different side to him.
Yeah,
True. Although his comeback as Dr. Robotnik in Sonic is just amazing. And I know you're not even there again yet.
Nope.
But I had a boy who's grown out of that now, but was a Sonic the Hedgehog. Everything was Sonic. And I was pleasantly surprised by that movie.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Jim Carrey stole the entire movie.
That's interesting.
And they have the second one coming out in like 2 weeks.
There you go. So I had the opportunity last week to visit your alma mater, USC.
Fight on.
And I spoke at a upper class comms class that's focused on political communications and
At Annenberg.
At Annenberg, and it was a great experience.
Really?
I really enjoyed it.
How did that come about?
The professor is a guy that used to work for Frank Luntz, and he and I had worked on some projects together years ago.
Oh, great.
And so
There weren't any protesters as you walked into class? No. People weren't trying to shout you
down?
down?
He kept it under wraps with just his class, I think. I think if the administration had known, they might have had an issue. But
they would have.
No, I
Because apparently, free speech is a big issue on college campuses.
Yeah. It's a good thing there wasn't any admin people.
You saw what happened last week at Yale Law School.
Yeah.
That could have happened to you.
That's true. I doubt it. But I was very impressed with how engaged the students were. So these are some comms majors.
This was a 400 level class.
Yeah.
So seniors mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that they had just come off spring break, so they were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
They were lucid.
Yeah, but it was. They asked really, really solid questions, and it gave me a chance to tell some pretty fun stories. But
what were some of the questions they asked you?
Well,
I'm concerned about the educational system in America, but the fact that
these students gave me hope in the future.
That's great.
I'm guessing, we didn't really talk about philosophy. I'm guessing most of them probably lean left. There might be a handful or so that didn't, but. They asked, the one question was, you were with John Shattuck. They'd obviously done some research on me.
Did anybody ask you about how you're the Prince of Dark Money?
No.
Then they didn't really do much of their research, did they?
Well, they got a kick out of the name of our podcast.
Oh, did you promote the podcast?
I promoted the podcast.
Oh, great. Well, shout out to all you Trojans out there listening. Fight on.
Fight on. So... The one of the questions was, you were with John Shattuck during the 9/11 crisis and during the financial crisis a few years later. How did you deal with those things, and how has it shaped how you deal with crises in your professional life now? Which I thought was a pretty good question.
Yeah.
So one other question was, this was asked. So there was a student there who is from Safford.
Oh wow!
Which is where I was born.
Yeah,
she was pretty excited to see a Safford boy,
an Arizonan.
I was, impressed that we had Safford represented at USC.
Oh, good.
But she asked a question about having grown up in a small town, and how have you your philosophy or values, how have they stayed the same? How has that influenced your philosophy and values, and what's stayed the same, what's changed? I thought that was a pretty
How did you
insightful
answer
question.
that? That's a great
I
question.
said that, well, having grown up in a very religious household, that there were a number of things, and a very conservative household. I was obviously philosophically pretty much the same as where I was growing up. I'm probably socially a little bit more moderate than I was back then.
Really?
Yeah.
See,
But-
I did not know that about you.
Yeah,
In what ways are you more socially moderate?
Well, I think I have no problem with gay marriage.
Okay.
So, and growing up, I would have definitely had an issue with that. So that's probably the most obvious example of where I've evolved on that issue or changed.
Did they ask you about that?
No. There were questions about, how do you deal with, either creating a brush fire or defending, and so talk about opposition research
Yeah.
and, negative campaigning and hits like that. So I was able to tell the story about when I was in helping with Tom Coburn's Senate race, and they had a vicious TV commercial attack, and how we dealt with that. So overall, it was a very engaging conversation, and I think I might get a chance to go back next
that's great.
semester, and I'll continue to be a little.
Be an adjunct professor at the University
I don't
of
know
Southern
about
California.
that, but I'll be a visiting speaker
Yeah.
on the regular. So
Well, that's great.
yeah. So I was
that's-
impressed with your alma mater. Yeah, it's a beautiful. I'd forgotten how beautiful that campus is.
Well, and the Annenberg. So, you were in the new Annenberg building,
Well,
right next to the
no.
bookstore, or were you in the
I was in
older
the
one?
Wallace Annenberg. It's kitty corner to some field, like a stadium-ish looking. like a
Okay,
track
so it's
field or
it's
something.
kitty corner to Heritage Hall and all that over there, and that's one of the most beautiful parts of campus.
Yeah.
Kind of tucked in the trees and everything.
Yeah.
Is that where you
no,
were?
Yeah. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah, that's an amazing part of campus. I used to just go there and kind of hang out and sit and
Yeah,
watch the
and
world go by.
I
I lurked.
had a little bit of a, time.
You go to the
Between-
bookstore, get some swag.
No, I didn't. I thought about it. I should have.
Should have brought me back something.
Yeah, you're right. I feel bad
What's
about
wrong
that
with
now.
you?
I don't know. I wasn't thinking.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think what's encouraging about you being invited to go on campus is that there's this, right now there's a crisis in free speech, especially
Yes.
on college campuses, where conservative speakers, and this is not a new thing, but it's getting more vitriolic, where people are being shouted down and threatened by physically and
and actually that leads to one of the other great
and
questions.
so communication, you being invited is one thing. It's a closed classroom. He probably laid some ground rules and what have you. I'm sure some people took your picture and tweeted it out or
Maybe.
did something,
I don't
whatever.
know.
But if we lose free speech, if we lose the ability to speak truth, and just have a discussion within a college setting, which is supposed to be where you have those discussions, we're going to lose this country.
Yeah. Well, and I was very, so there was a question about, how do you deal with, how do we change? Because I talked a lot about how vitriolic the political debate has been. And I was asked a question about how, is there a way to change it? I said, ultimately, the most important way to change it is you. That as people who engage in political discourse, we have to be kind. We can be agreeable in our disagreements. We don't have to be assholes. We can have very strong opinions.
There are
very
children who listen to this show. I just want you to know
Sorry.
that.
Yeah. Wow.
I was informed of that the other day.
When I dropped another F-bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you
Okay.
dropped the F-bomb. And
Sorry.
a good friend of mine
Um,
had his kids in the car. He's like, what was that? I'm like,
Ew.
okay.
I apologize. the thing I did, that was wrong.
But it's free
apologize.
speech. You know,
Well, vulgarity is not necessarily, I mean, it's free speech, but it's not necessary.
but we have people being banned for all sorts of things. People being taken off Twitter. People being canceled, and the cancel culture is all the rage right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at an article in Town Hall. Tucker Carlson hits back on Twitter for censoring his account. You know, for retweeting things that were taken off, like the Babylon Bee and some of the transgender
Well,
issues
how
that are
in the
going
world
on.
is the Babylon Bee? I mean, it's flipping.
Their man of the
Fake,
year.
I mean,
tweet.
it is literally parody.
Yeah, it's all parody. But that we can go into those issues at another time. But I guess I'm a purist, and maybe I'm more of a liberal, dare say, or a classical liberal, or maybe a liberal from the 1970s or 60s in terms of speech. Like I truly believe, like, I will defend your right to say stupid stuff. I will defend your right to say racist stuff. I will defend your right to say whatever you feel that you need to say, even though I disagree with it.
Yeah.
Because that's what this country was founded on.
I mean, you think about college campuses in the 60s, the people who were protesting and fighting for free speech, and they've got to be just, I mean, well, Ira Glassman, who was the head of the ACLU, who defended Nazis and their right to march in Skokie, Illinois,
Yeah.
in the middle of the Jewish community. I mean, he got a lot of grief for that, but his position was, we have to protect the First Amendment.
Yeah.
Because it is about things we don't agree with, but we've got to be able to have the ability to have debate and the exchange of ideas.
I mean, and this is how topsy-turvy things have become. So I'm listening to a podcast yesterday, and I forwarded it on to you. And I'm not even a big fan of Megyn Kelly, but for some reason she had RFK Jr. on. I go, oh, I want to listen to this, because here's a guy who's from this iconic family.
Right.
I mean, basically staunch defenders of the First Amendment, you know, better or for worse, who's being canceled all over the country for having a contrarian view on vaccines.
Yeah.
And also for writing a book called The Real Tony Fauci, basically blasting Dr. Fauci for making millions and millions of dollars off of the policies he's pursued over the last 30, 40 years.
Interesting.
Most very accurate book, and he's been blasted for it. And yet he made the point. He said, I've defended Nazis for being able to march. I've defended it, and now I'm being canceled for being critical of some policies that have brought some harm to certain members of the population.
Yeah.
I mean, he made great points about how the shutdowns have hurt the poor, that the entire Fauciism is a war on the poor, and made some other great points just about the economic calamities that our country has endured for what over the last several years, and yet he's being counseled.
Yeah, the health calamities. I mean, one thing that we both saw yesterday was this new report out that there were more alcohol-related deaths for the population under 65 in the U.S. last year than of COVID.
Yeah,
and that's
and that goes into the discussion of with COVID or from COVID.
Well,
and then from COVID is probably even less, but the alcohol piece is something that I read that article and I was deeply troubled by it, principally because there are politicians here locally I personally reached out to and said, do not shut things down. Don't shut down the restaurants. Don't shut down the bars. Don't shut down anything. Because, first of all, those are workers that are some of our most vulnerable,
mm-hmm.
because they work paycheck to paycheck. And you're gonna see an increase. And don't shut down any businesses either. I was 100% against shutdowns because of exactly what that report said. We're going to see increase in drug abuse, depression, alcohol abuse, and then everything that comes with that: spousal abuse, child abuse.
Right.
Right. And we've seen all of that because of the policies pursued by the last administration and this administration.
Yeah.
So but a year ago, you could be canceled for saying that the Wuhan lab, created COVID.
Or
You could
actually not saying it, but saying that's a
the
possibility.
possibility that COVID came from the Wuhan lab as a leak, and you would be canceled from
Yeah.
YouTube and everything else. And now it's given due consideration.
Well, maybe more than due consideration.
So yesterday's misinformation is today's fact.
Right.
I'm ranting, but I just feel like we're at a really dangerous place in our country where you have a panel, one of liberal, one of conservative. They're going to have a discussion. They're going to have a debate. And you have leftists coming in and shouting them down and threatening them with bodily harm, which is what happened at Yale Law School last week. I was outraged by that.
Well,
And so for you to go to the University of Southern California, one of the most prestigious universities in the country, as the prince of dark money, and be able to speak freely at an Annenberg Communications class is a victory.
yeah, call it a victory. That's good.
I'll take it as a victory.
Yeah. Well, I think that at some point there's going to be a whiplash. Maybe it's already begun, but those that are trying to suppress speech ultimately will fail because their overreach is going to be just too much.
Yeah.
It just depends on how much damage they can do until that happens. And I think that's why we have to stay vigilant on protecting the right of people to say what they believe, even when we think it's outrageous.
I mean, just
Or just raise questions.
Even what's going on in Ukraine, you have this. I'm bringing up Tucker Carlson again and Tulsi Gabbard. They were labeled Russian assets 2 weeks ago for just asking what the end game in there. Who's making the money?
Yeah.
Who's going to benefit most from our policies in Ukraine? And what do we need to do to make sure that we don't get into a quagmire? That's all they were asking.
Yeah.
You're a Russian asset. We can't go there. I will defend anyone's right to say stupid stuff or stuff that makes other people upset.
Yeah. Well, then we will be.
Maybe we'll
defenders
get
of free
canceled
speech.
for saying what we just
Yeah,
said. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
We're just
All
a
right.
little small.
Yeah. Well,
Small part of the body politic.
thanks to USC and the students there.
USC has a football team.
I heard that.
They had
I heard
a
about
practice the other day.
that. They did.
They
I should have
did.
gone by.
And it was called by Colin Cowherd the most perfect practice ever. That's what he
Wow.
said. He tweeted that out.
So there's some high hopes for USC this coming season.
Well, I mean, Lincoln Riley comes in and he bought a $14 million home in Palos Verdes.
Okay.
You should see this place. But yeah, so hopefully he wins.
He better. He's gonna have
Hopefully
to
he
get rid of
wins.
that house if he doesn't.
I certainly will be there at the first game against Rice.
I'm sure you will. All right.
We'll fight on.
Fight on. Have a great one, folks. Thanks for listening.